Fantastic. I want to thank you all for being here this evening to what promises to be an educational evening of debates. My name is Dane Wunderlich, and I have the distinct privilege of being your moderator this evening at the Lake Elsinore Citizens Committee Candidates Debates. At this time, I'd like you all to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. A couple items I do want to let you know about. We have a water station for everyone over to the right-hand side. We do have 2 restroom facilities in front and also in the lounge area over to your left-hand side. If you're coming up front, please be aware there are audio and video cables running directly in front of the stage, so please also watch your step. The debates we're going to be hearing tonight are for Congressional District 42, the State Senate District 28, and Water District 1. We would like to thank all the candidates for taking the time to be with us this evening. The forum will be conducted as follows. All candidates will have 3 minutes for opening speeches, 2 to 2.5 minutes for answering questions, and a 1 to 2 minute rebuttal if needed. Please note rebuttal should be reserved for comments you know to be factually wrong, and you may not introduce new arguments. We will conclude, if time permits, with a 2 to 3 minute closing speech. Candidates, please note you will need to speak clearly and closely into the microphone. If you're looking for some good YouTube time, the event is also being recorded, so make sure you're addressing the crowd as well as the camera. Candidates, also please be respectful of the timekeepers. We're on a tight schedule this evening. They do have cards to warn you of 30 and 10 seconds left to talk, as well as a special card to let you know it's time to stop talking. All questions have been submitted by local citizens and have been approved by the board of the Lake Elsinore Citizens Committee. They invite you to submit your own questions to the voters guide at LECC.us. You can also sign up for their monthly newsletter on the forms they have provided around the room, and you can also sign up for their monthly newsletter on their website as well. I ask that you please hold all applause until the debate has concluded, at which time all of our candidates a round of applause. I want to thank you once again for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here tonight. We will start our debates with Congressional District 42, and I was going to invite Tim Sheridan up, but Mr. Tim Sheridan is already on stage. Thanks for being here tonight with us, Tim.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
I'm going to start out this evening with an announcement. Unfortunately, Mr. Ken Calvert declined our invitation to speak tonight at our fall candidate debate, just as he declined our invitation to speak at our spring candidate forum in May. To educate our members about this platform, in his absence, the LECC board has compiled the top 5 reasons to re-elect Ken Calvert. In between questions, we asked Mr. Sheridan, we will cite one of the 5 reasons, and then allow Mr. Sheridan a short time to rebut if he likes. And we now have a 3-minute opening statement from Mr. Tim Sheridan.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Tim Sheridan. I'm running for Congress in California's 42nd District. And before I start, I want to make note that today, October 10th, 2014, is the 50th anniversary of my parents' wedding. They were married on October 10th, 1964 in Syracuse, New York. And although my dad passed away in 1996, I want to look into the camera and say to my mom, I love you. She's currently in Castleberry, Florida. I talked to her before I came over today, and so she'll see this videotape at some point. I love you, Mom, and happy anniversary, 50 years. I'm running for Congress because Congress is broken. It doesn't work very well. And I want to go to Washington and work to ensure that we have good government in Washington. That's my main focus. To get to D.C. and to make sure that we have good government. Now, there are 2 things that a member of Congress does. Number 1, they do the legislative work in Washington, D.C. And number 2, what they do is they provide constituent service for constituents in the district. Now, when I win this election next month, and I start my term in January, my focus is going to be on constituent services. I am going to make sure that here in the 42nd Congressional District of California, that you have good congressional representation through our office. I'm going to hire people who are going to work very hard on behalf of the people of the district. I'll be in Washington when I need to be, and when I don't need to be, I'm going to be right here in the district. My pledge to you is this. In my first term, when I'm not in Washington, D.C., I will be in the district. Now, I promised my wife I'd give her a 7-day vacation each year, and so for 7 days I'll be outside the district. But other than that, when I'm not in Washington, D.C., I'll be in the district. I will not take any congressional junkets whatsoever. A congressional junket is a special trip that members of Congress can take, and that's not something that I will do in my first term in Congress. And as I have done throughout this campaign, I will show up at events throughout the district. We've gone to parades, we've gone to music festivals, we've gone pretty much anywhere there's a group of people just to say hello and shake hands. And that's my pledge to you. You will not have to go to a dinner and pay $50 to talk to me. All you'll have to do is show up somewhere where I am, and you'll be able to chat with me. And that's something I'm looking forward to doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. I do have our Re-Elect Ken Calvert, reason number 1. A vote for Ken Calvert is a vote to stop Obama. The midterm elections were critical. The only thing standing in the way of President Obama's big government agenda is the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. We can't afford to hand the Speaker's gavel back to Nancy Pelosi. Next year's midterm elections are critical. Mr. Sheridan, 2 minutes.
I do want to rebut that. Essentially what Mr. Calvert is saying in that particular statement is that he wants more of the same. And the reason I'm running for Congress is because Congress is broken. And you know that Mr. Calvert is very serious about making sure that the Congress doesn't work for another 2 years if he's reelected. All you have to do is go out and look at his signs. He's got those signs out there that talk about voting for him and stopping the president. That's not the kind of Congress that we need. We need to send someone to Washington who will go to Washington and work across the aisle. Talk to people on both sides of the aisle. I am committed to good government. I promise when I get to Washington, I won't just talk to Democrats. I'll talk to Republicans and independents as well. I think it's vital in this time, in this country, that we have a Congress that is willing to sit down across the table from each other and work out whatever differences that we have. And that's something that I promise I will do.
Mr. Sheridan, a recent poll of LECC members showed that we're 47% Republican, 30% independent, and just 17% Democrat. In addition, 55% of LECC members consider themselves fiscally conservative. What are the top 2 things you would do in office that would please our very conservative members that we won't get if we return Mr. Calvert to Washington?
Well, the first thing I want to make note of is there is a program, there's a law actually called PAYGO, Pay As You Go. It was signed into law by President Obama in 2010. And essentially what it is a law that requires that before the Congress can spend any money on a particular issue, they have to find savings in another program, and or they have to cut some money from some other program before they can spend that money. And that is a program that a Democrat, Steny Hoyer from Maryland, introduced and eventually, as I said, got signed into law by the President. That is something that I will continue. Now, you may recall that PAYGO was also used in the Congress between 1990 and 2002. After 2002, the law expired and it went away until 2010. But the point I want to make is in 1998, we finally had a surplus in the budget, in part because of PAYGO. And that's something that I think fiscally conservative people want to make sure that we have. Additionally, let me talk about the government shutdown. You'll recall last October, the Congress, the House of Representatives, caused the government to shut down. That cost our country about $24 billion. There was nothing fiscally conservative about shutting down the government. It was closed down for 2 weeks, and the employees who didn't work for those 2 weeks eventually got paid. That's something else that, when I'm in Washington, I will make sure that I do as much as possible to make sure that we don't close the government, because it's just a big waste of money to do so. Additionally, and finally, I pledge to you that I will not vote for any program, military program, that a branch of our military does not want. You see all the time that there is a plane that's being built, or there's a ship that's being built, or a helicopter that's being built, and the military is saying, we don't want it. Fiscally conservative people think that's a waste of money. I agree, and that's not something I'll vote for when I'm in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Re-Elect Ken Calvert, reason 2. Press Enterprise endorses Ken Calvert. Quoting a line from the Press Enterprise opinion page, when it comes to the representation of the 42nd District, voters would do well to send more like-minded Mr. Calvert back to Congress for another term. This sentiment seems to be echoed by many LECC members who answered, we know what we're getting with Ken, when asked, why are you voting for Mr. Calvert? 2 minutes.
Well, you know how those liberal Press Enterprise people are. Mr. Calvert has been in Congress for over 20 years, and I don't know that everyone really knows everything that Mr. Calvert engages in. Most of us know about the real estate dealings, where he went out and bought property near March Air Force Base, and then he turned around and got an earmark in Congress to improve property around the property that he built, and then he went and he sold the property. He made about $400,000 on that transaction. So I'm not sure people know a lot about that. But let me talk to you about two other things that Mr. Calvert has engaged in the last 2 years that I think if people in this district knew about, they would think twice about voting for him. First of all, Mr. Calvert has spent about $30,000 going to Napa Valley for what we would call campaign events out of his campaign fund. $30,000. It's perfectly legal. But whether it's appropriate to take that kind of money and go up into Napa Valley and spend it for campaign events is another question. Additionally, Mr. Calvert has spent, and we're not making this up, he spent $4,000 on cigars in and around Washington, D.C. over the course of the last 2 years. Again, it's campaign money. It's money that he gets from people who want to see him elected. But the question becomes, is that appropriate to spend that kind of money? Mr. Calvert is a classic example of someone who's in the political class. And it's time that we send someone back to Washington who's not in the political class. Let me make this point as well. Mr. Calvert made the most corrupt list of the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington 4 times since 2006. I don't know if people in the district know about that, but I suspect if they did, they would not want to re-elect Mr. Calvert, and so I don't think he should be elected either. Not that that would come as a surprise to anybody here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for you. While all of our members speak and vote in the 42nd District, a great many of us spend our days driving to and from San Diego, Orange County, and LA to earn a living at distant, good-paying jobs. What will you do to bring good jobs into our district so we can cut the commute?
First, let me say that I think that we live in a beautiful part of the country and a beautiful part of the state. We are surrounded by some very expensive counties, and Riverside County is one of the least expensive places to live. It's a place where business should want to move, to be part of Southern California and to be part of this area at a reduced cost to run their business. Now, let's be honest about this. If I get to Washington in January, I'm not going to be able to stand up and wave a magic wand and all these businesses are going to show up in Riverside County. But one of the things I'm going to pledge to you to do is this. When I'm elected to Congress, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to work both in Washington and in this area to talk to businesses and to encourage them to come and to move to Riverside County. Jobs is the most important thing that we can bring to Riverside County, and the best way to do it is to bring businesses here. And that's something that I will work very hard to do over the course of my time in Washington. I will sell this region. Let me also say that I support business tax credits to bring these businesses out here to Riverside County, give them a chance to get established, give them a chance to hire the terrific people that live here, and I think that's something important that we should do. Thank you.
Re-Elect Ken Calvert, reason number 3. Open to compromise on an eventual comprehensive immigration bill. As reported in this Press Enterprise blog post, there was a link to click there, Mr. Calvert said he supports eventual citizenship for some folks who come to the United States as children, but only legalization without citizenship for those who come as adults. Yet he doesn't rule out voting for a bill with a broad path to citizenship if there are enough other elements in the legislation that he supports, such as requiring the use of the E-Verify online database to confirm that employers only hire legal workers that Mr. Calvert actually helped to start. 2-minute rebuttal.
Well, early last year, the Senate passed an immigration bill that would have provided, and still could if the House goes back into session at the end or after the election's over, that would provide 2 important points that Mr. Calvert referred to in his statement. Number 1, it would provide a path to citizenship of up to 13 years for those who are here and undocumented. The other thing it would provide is additional money for border security. Now, it passed the Senate on a bipartisan basis. 68 senators passed it. 49 Democrats, 2 independents, and 17 Republicans. After that bill was passed, it was sent to the House of Representatives. Speaker Boehner decided to table the bill. He did not allow the bill to come up for a vote, and as a result of his failure to allow it to come to a vote, the bill is still pending in the House of Representatives. Had Mr. Calvert stood up and said, once that bill was sent to the House, that he believed that it should have been brought up for a yes or no vote, that would have been the right thing to do. Mr. Calvert did not do that. Even though this bill was forged with compromises from senators who are also very conservative, including John McCain from Arizona, Jeff Flake from Arizona, Marco Rubio from Florida, and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. When those 4 senators agreed that an immigration bill should be considered, I think that Mr. Calvert should have stood up at that time and also said that this bill should have been considered. The fact that he didn't is just an indication that Mr. Calvert is not a leader in the Congress. And let me just make one point about the fact that Mr. Calvert is not a leader in the Congress. He's been there for 22 years, and he just got his first subcommittee chairmanship late last year. And the reason he got that subcommittee chairmanship was because another member of Congress, Bill Young from Florida, passed away. So he's been in Congress for 22 years, and 16 of those years, the Republicans have had the majority, and Mr. Calvert never got a subcommittee chairmanship. That's an indication of a lack of leadership on his part.
Thank you. And a question for you. With Medicare and Social Security, it seems like the federal government has promised more money to the retiring baby boomers than our kids and grandkids will ever be able to pay with their taxes. What's your plan to balance these promised entitlements against a realistically reduced ability of future generations to pay?
That's a good question. Social Security and Medicare is a very important part of our country. Social Security is the most successful program for seniors that this country has ever produced. And it's just been a terrific program. Now, there is some concern that going forward that the program may not be able to be sustained. But according to most economists, Social Security will be solvent up until 2037. After that, and that's if Congress does nothing else, so it'll be fine up until 2037. After that, if Congress still doesn't do anything, what will happen is benefits will be reduced by about a quarter. So people will get 3/4 of the amount of money that they otherwise would have gotten. That's if Congress does nothing over that period of time. Now, just let me make one more point that I want to make about Social Security, which I think is important. Social Security is actually a program where the current individuals who are paying into the system pay the money that is then given to the people who are collecting the Social Security benefits. That's the way Social Security was set up in the 30s, and that's the way it still runs today. Now, Mr. Calvert has indicated that he would support some form of privatization of Social Security. I absolutely oppose that. And the reason I oppose it is for that same reason, that if we put Social Security money into the stock market, we've seen what happens in the stock market, right? Everybody remembers 2008 when the stock market crashed. That was a disaster. If we had all that Social Security money in the stock market at that time, that would not have been beneficial for most people in this country. But if we allow that type of program to exist, that would change the fundamental change of the way that Social Security works, which is that today's workers pay for tomorrow's, or pay for today's retirees. Now, there are going to have to be some changes that are made in Social Security after 2037 to make sure that it's fiscally solvent going forward. But I would remind you that in 1983, President Reagan and Tip O'Neill and the Senate Republicans all sat down in a room and worked out a deal so that Social Security remained solvent up until this point. Because you may recall at that point there was also some concern about Social Security going away. That's another reason why when we get to Washington, we're going to need people who are going to be willing to sit down with the other side to work out deals so that the program can continue. And there is an ability to do that. We just need to send the right people to Washington who are not going to play political games, but who instead are going to go there and work hard to try to resolve the issue. Now, there are some different proposals to resolve the issue, and I think that the Congress will have to sit down and work out some deal to make sure that Social Security will go forward. It's a great program, and it's something that we need to keep. Thank you.
Re-Elect Ken Calvert, reason number 4, will protect private property rights from the EPA land grab. The EPA would like to have full power to seize land and property as they see fit for environmental agendas. The EPA's proposed rule under the Clean Water Act would give the agency full authority over streams and intermittent waters that feed into navigable waterways. This would drastically reduce their need for accountability in explaining the reasons for doing so. Already, environmental agencies have more power than anyone to confiscate our water resources and land without due process. It is vital that this doesn't happen. As U.S. Congressman Ken Calvert states, this proposal is the greatest expansion of federal control over land and water resources in the 42-year history of the Clean Water Act, and they should be and should make every landowner fearful that the EPA will be knocking on the door with an enforcement action. 2-minute vote.
Let me use a word that politicians sometimes use. Oh no, not that politicians use, but that they invoke. And that word is called exaggeration. Congressman Calvert is way over-exaggerating this issue. It's really kind of shocking when you look at what he wrote about this issue. Here's the truth about this particular situation. There are 2 agencies that have proposed this rule. One is EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the other agency is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The reason that these 2 agencies have proposed this rule is because there were 2 Supreme Court cases that came down dealing with this issue. And the Supreme Court essentially told the agencies, hey, you got to make some changes to make the rules more clear with respect to navigable waters. And that's why the EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have come up with these programs. When Mr. Calvert said this is a land grab, that's simply not the case. Because under the Clean Water Act, the EPA does not regulate land. It only regulates bodies of water. And if you go to the EPA website, what they'll tell you is this. You have an EPA controlled waterway here. You have another one over here. And as everybody knows, in between waterways very often there are streams, right? All the agency wants to do, both the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers, is regulate those streams between the 2 areas that are already controlled by EPA. Why is that important? It's important because if someone dumps some chemical in those streams, water flows, and that water will flow into one of the 2 bodies of water that are already regulated by EPA. And so again, Mr. Calvert has over-exaggerated this issue. He, of course, is, as I said earlier, a subcommittee chairman, which includes the Environmental Protection Agency. He's not a fan of the Environmental Protection Agency, and I think that's why he's blown this way out of proportion. So trust me when I tell you, this is an exaggeration, and what EPA and Army Corps of Engineers is doing is appropriate in my view.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Our recent LECC survey showed that 82% of LECC members disapprove of the performance of the current U.S. Congress, but incumbents keep getting returned to D.C. What's broken with Congress, and what one action will you take to fix it if we send you to D.C.?
Well, I mean, this goes right to the heart of why I'm running for Congress. I'm running for Congress because it's broken. It simply doesn't work very well. We saw and we heard members of the Senate make claims that their whole goal was to stop the president from being reelected. While that, may have been something political to do, that wasn't beneficial for the country. John Boehner has, made it very difficult for members of the House of Representatives to consider bills that come up because of what is called the Hassert Rule. Something I wrote about in the PE op-ed that I wrote a few weeks ago. I would invite you to go back and take a look at it. But I think that the heart of this matter is that if Mr. Calvert is reelected, we're going to have another 2 years of a broken Congress. How do we know that? All you have to do is look at his signs, where he says, vote for me, stop the president. I mean, that's the wrong way to go about governing. You may not get everything you want when you're in government or when you're a legislator in government, But you shouldn't be starting off with the premise that we're going to do everything we can do to stop the other side. That's not what this country needs. What this country needs is people who are willing to go to Washington and work across the aisle. And I pledge to you that I will do that. I ask for your support in that regard. And this is what I've said to people in this district. And I appreciate that there is a majority of Republicans in this district. This is what I tell them. One vote for one term. Give me 2 years to see what I can do. And after 2 years, if you don't like what I can do, then you can vote me out. But we already know what Mr. Calvert's going to do. And Mr. Calvert's going to continue the broken government. And that's not beneficial for anybody. Give me a chance to go to Washington. Give me a chance to work here in the district. And see what a new representative can do for this area. Thank you.
The final reason we got to see me to re-elect Ken Calvert is he opposes the California high-speed rail project and quoted as saying, as if it wasn't bad enough that Jerry Brown's high-speed rail boondoggle is once again over budget. Now we learn that rail officials are trying to hide the cost increases from Californians. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Sometimes in politics you steal answers from other people. And we're going to steal an answer here because I heard a response to this question recently and it made complete sense to me. In 2008, the high-speed rail was part of a proposition that was passed by the people of California. They wanted this high-speed rail. And as a legislator, especially a congressional legislator, I don't believe it's appropriate for me to stand in the way of this type of program, even if I don't otherwise agree with it. It's another example of a broken government. Because the only way to stop this program is to go through the proposition process again. So it's going to happen. But what Mr. Calvert is essentially saying is he's willing to waste more of your tax money over the course of the next 2 years to try to stop this program just because he doesn't like it. But it's something that the people of California have passed, and it's something that we as Californians and we as California legislators should follow. You know, the people said that this is what they want. If Mr. Calvert doesn't want it, maybe he should start a proposition. But again, if he just plays games, political games in Washington, it's going to create more cost overruns. And again, that's not beneficial for anybody, and it's a waste of taxpayer money. So if you want to be fiscally conservative on this issue, don't elect Mr. Calvert because he's going to take that position that he's going to take whatever he can to stop it. And I don't think that's a good thing for us. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, our final question for you this evening before your closing. It would be disingenuous to suggest that the Lake Elsinore Citizens Committee is not disappointed that Mr. Calvert decided not to accept our 2 invitations to speak this year at our spring forum and fall debate, which made us wonder about the constituent services in general. Other than showing up to speak to district members when invited, what constituent services should we be getting from our congressional representative, and how will you do this better or different than Mr. Calvert?
Thank you. You know, and I would note that it's only 7:05, right? We're supposed to go to 7:30. But I guess there's a time frame. Right? So, Mr. Calvert has been in office for 22 years. And he's not here tonight. He said that the reason he didn't want to come here is because he was afraid I might attack him. I don't think I've attacked him tonight. I think I've just talked about facts. I think that Mr. Calvert isn't here tonight because he knows he can't justify the facts that he has put forward to ask for another term from you. We can do better. What I'm going to do, as I said in my opening, with respect to constituent services, that's going to be my main focus. They give you a house account in the House of Representatives to set up your office. And the majority of that house account is going to go for constituent services in this district. The one thing I'm going to try to do, and I don't know that we'll be able to do it, is have 2 offices in this district. This is a huge district. It starts up in Eastvale, it goes all the way down to Temecula. I know those roads because I've been traveling them for the last year. What I would like to do is have an office in the north and then an office again in the south. Probably Murrieta and probably Corona. So that's one thing I'm going to do. Another thing I'm going to do that's going to be different is I'm going to have town hall meetings. I'm going to show up during congressional recesses and talk to people like you in a town hall format. And again, I appreciate that there's a majority of Republicans in this district, but I'm willing to do that because I think that's something that a member of Congress should do on a regular basis. Mr. Calvert has represented this district now for 2 years, and he has never had a town hall meeting where people can come out and ask him questions. The only time that you can see Mr. Calvert is if you spend $50 to go to a dinner somewhere and then have a chance to go up and say hello. I don't think that's the way a U.S. congressman should treat his constituents in his district, regardless of how long that they're in office. Here's something else I'm going to do too. In my district offices, I am going to hire people who are experts in particular areas. So, for example, I'm going to have someone who's an expert on veterans who will work in my district office. So if you're a veteran and you have a problem with the federal government, you're going to be able to call that office, and that person who is an expert in that area is going to talk to you. We'll have an expert on Social Security and some of the other issues as well. So those 3 things are things I'm going to do. And again, I don't know that I can do 2 offices, but if I can, that's something I'm going to focus on. We'll have offices in the north and in the south. I'm going to hold regular town hall meetings, and I'm going to make sure that we have people dedicated in each office to talk about particular issues. I think that's very important. The other thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to make sure my website is updated on a regular basis. If you go to Mr. Calvert's website, it's not as updated as it should be, but I will make sure that mine is. So those are the things I'm going to do.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. I've been making looks back and forth with our timekeepers here, and we are a little bit ahead of schedule. We discussed a 2-minute closing.
Allow him to extend his closing up to 7:20.
Looks like you have about 15 minutes if you'd like to utilize that time. Begin.
You know, I just love audiences, and I love microphones, and I love to sing.
Don't give up your day job.
Here's the secret: I can't sing. So. As long as I have a little bit of time, let me make a couple of other points I wanted to make. We talked about Mr. Calvert being a subcommittee chairman, getting his first subcommittee chairmanship last year. Let me talk about 2 other members of Congress who were elected the same year that Mr. Calvert was elected. One is named Ed Royce, who's a Southern California congressman. The other one is named Buck McKeon, who's also a Southern California congressman. Both of those 2 individuals were elected the same year as Mr. Calvert. Mr. Royce is the Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman. Mr. McKeon is the Armed Services Chairman. Both are full committees in the House of Representatives. When you go to the House of Representatives and you spend 22 years there, and 2 of your colleagues from the same area work their way up to committee chairmanships, and all you've ever gotten is a subcommittee chairmanship, and you only got that because another member passed away, that's an indication that you're not a leader in the Congress, and that we can do better. Now, obviously, if I get elected, when I get elected, and I go to Washington in January, I'm not going to get a subcommittee chairmanship right away. But Mr. Calvert has not demonstrated over the course of the last 22 years that he deserves another term in the House of Representatives. Let me tell you a story, and I won't mention the individual because I don't want to, we're being taped. So. I went to a dinner down in San Diego about 8 months ago, and there were members of Congress there. And I walked up to one of the members after the dinner was over, and I wanted to introduce myself. And I said to the member, my name is Tim Sheridan, I'm running against Ken Calvert. And that individual said to me, you've heard this story, that individual said to me, I don't even know you, but I know you'll do a better job than Mr. Calvert. Right off the bat, which really highlighted to me the fact that Mr. Calvert is not a leader in Congress. For another member, and I'll be honest, it was a Democrat member, who would come out there and say that to someone that person had never met. It was quite a stark comment to make. Mr. Calvert simply is not a leader in the Congress, and I think that we can do much better. Now, yesterday, we went to an event in Temecula. Mr. Calvert was there, and he had a chance to speak. And in his speech, he made note that the speaker had assigned him to a particular committee that he did not want to be a member of. Again, when you stand up in front of a group of people and say that you do not want to be a member of a particular committee and that the Speaker forced you to do it, you got to ask yourself, is he very well respected in the Congress? And I don't think that he is. We can do so much better, ladies and gentlemen, and I would appreciate your support in that regard. Again, I'm running for Congress because it doesn't work well, and we can do better. I've been very fortunate to have a terrific team during the course of my campaign help me, and they've just been terrific. And I can promise you this, when I'm elected and we set up our offices, I'm going to have another terrific team that's going to help you as constituents in this district. And I would appreciate your support for that reason. Again, my name is Tim Sheridan, and I am running for Congress in California's 42nd District. And just one more time to my mother, happy anniversary. I love you very much. Thank you very much.